Not the topic per se, but just shortly before I jumped on, got a message from a very dear friend that I haven't talked to in a long time, that one of our mutual friends passed away. Yeah, so that was a little hard and heavy. So just, I've got to say this for any of you that are listening and you've had someone pass, whether you knew them really well or whether you haven't talked to them in years, grief still settles in. It doesn't really matter. And, when we lose someone that we cared about, that we loved, that we connected to, we get another ally in the spirit world. But there's just a piece of us that's missing here, right? Yeah. But that's not what I wanted to focus on talking about because it's been quite a weekend. So we are literally the Monday after the new moon, the most recent eclipse, right? So we've had about 2 weeks where we've been in this eclipse portal. And it was a pretty intense weekend. Just the last 2 weeks energetically, I think, have been very, very intense for a lot of people. I have talked to so many folks that have had just this heightened, whether it's sensitivity or just this heightened kind of energetic conflict, maybe that's going on, things that they're being called to let go of, face. And that's a lot of times what these eclipse portals can do. Uh, but yeah, I thought it was very serendipitous that we haven't had in the Metro Detroit area rain, really a lot of rain at all in the last couple of weeks. And yesterday it rained for a little while. And then today I'm sitting here and I'm doing some work and I'm doing some writing, and it just opened up and poured. And so I want you to all pause and just think about that sometimes when the rain comes, especially when it's heavy, like that heavy rain, that it is very intentional. It's this way that Mother Nature lets us know and reminds us that she is helping to wash away all of the residue of maybe work that we've done, intense work that we've had, emotions and feelings that have been too heavy, and that water allows them to dilute and wash away. Yeah. Uh, but I had some really amazing magic happen before this new moon. Not only did we have the setting of Mabon this weekend, so I was able to lead ritual, but on Saturday I participated in a regular. We'll see if it goes on. The coordinator is uncertain if she'll be back again next year, but the Detroit Conjure and Folk Magic Festival, right? And I was very honored and privileged to be able to not just attend, but join in as a presenter and a vendor. And it was in this time that we reached the sober witch life, reached a milestone, right? Really solidified itself as a movement and kind of screamed to me out loud the role that Detroit gets to play in this, right? And I'm going to paint a little bit of this story here today, and I, encourage you to settle in and listen, just because it feels like this work is going to resonate, not just on what exactly specifically I'm talking about, but the fact that I have been called to this greater and this grand mission. And I've had this conversation like 2 or 3 times this weekend that every single one of us are going to be called to these missions in our lives, things that we are here, that we are meant to do. And it's so important that we remain focused on those missions. And so this weekend, as I was at that festival, I had this moment where I realized, and it's not been the first time, but I had this incredibly validating moment where I realized I am in the middle of something that is so much bigger than just me. Right? I had a booth set up. I shared a tent with a dear friend, but I had a table, and on my table I had stacks of the paperbacks and the hardcovers. I had a big poster of myself, right? And I was offering copies of the Sober Witch Life book. And folks would wander by, while I was there, and they would chat with me about it. But then lo and behold, I'd be in some area of the grounds and somebody would see me and they'd say, "Oh, you're the author of that book over there." Right? It was just this really kind of surreal event for me all day long. when I was selling, when, and I wish I had kept like a handwritten note of how many copies, but it's just, I was all over the place, kind of talking to folks and moving around. And I want to say it was close to 10 copies that I'd sold yesterday. And I just remember people picking it up, both for themselves, as well as stating that they felt that they knew somebody else that would need it. And so I was sitting here today thinking about what I might talk to you guys about and what I was going to write about this week. And I realized this weekend solidified over 100 copies of this book being sold. 100 copies, physical copies that are now out there living and breathing in the world in somebody else's hand, in somebody else's backpack, their tote bag, on their side table, right? Some of them are still sitting on the shelves of some of the metaphysical shops, right? I think we've got 4, 5, maybe 6 stores, metaphysical stores or bookstores throughout the Midwest that are currently carrying this title. And so some of these copies have been bought there. Some have been bought from the website. Some have been bought directly from Amazon. But these last 2 pagan gatherings alone, I've sold close to 20 copies. And I stopped and I reflected and I looked at this because it wasn't just the fact that I was selling these that was like a big deal, right? It was the conversations that I have had. It is every person that kind of stepped up and talked to me about my book. It's every shop owner that expressed excitement and delight. I had one person this past weekend that stood there, him and his girlfriend, and they were talking to me for quite some time. And we have a very close recovery date. I think he is just a month away from mine, right? I can't remember if his was in September. November is what I'm hearing. So he's November of 2019, right? And he bought a copy of the book and I signed it. And I said, "Who do you want me to make this copy out to?" And he said, "Make it to Bill W," right? Which I thought was beautiful because this means, hey, he may actually decide to gift this to someone at some point. And then he handed me the cash and I went to go give him change and he stopped me and he said, "No, you keep it. What you're doing matters more." Yeah, it wasn't about the money. It was this affirmation that he said this exchange that we had. And it's not been the first time. Every single time that I've sold this book in person, I've had more than one individual wave my hand away when I offered them change, right? Being there at this event, though, in person, in the city of pretty much Detroit, right? In this like metro Detroit area, I felt like every single time that I signed one of these copies, that it was in and of itself was something magical. Right? And I literally inscribe a magical inscription when I do my signings. The cool thing is people weren't just stepping forward to just buy a copy like they were at a checkout line. We would sit there and we would talk and we would share our own stories about who they were buying it for, why they were buying, or what they were thinking about when they looked at the book, right? Like I was seen in these moments, not me per se, but what it is that I'm here doing. I thought it was incredible when one of these women walked up into the booth and she looked at me. She's like, "Oh my God, you're the pink-haired sober witch." And I said, "Yeah." And I laughed. She goes, "I bought a copy of this book for one of my friends." And I like paused and I said, "Oh, were you at the last event?" And she goes, "No, I bought it online." I was like, "Oh, wow." I was like, "Do you remember how you found out about it?" She goes, "I don't know if it was like on Facebook or Instagram or whatever." How incredible. How unbelievably incredible that is, right? Once again, I have a mission. I have something that the spirit, the universe has spoken to me as to what I'm here to be doing. And every single time I hear these stories, it's a reminder that this phrase, sober witch, is almost a calling of belonging. When I first wrote the book, I should say when I first began writing the book, because it took me almost an entire year to write it, I wasn't thinking this far ahead. I wasn't thinking that I would be at like festivals. I wasn't thinking about how many copies necessarily that I would sell. I was thinking about survival and the fact that after 12 months in recovery myself, I looked back and I'd realized that in order for me to truly survive in my own recovery, I had to translate these traditional 12 steps into a language that embraced and encompassed witchcraft, my own spiritual belief. I began making ritual out of sobriety. you know, I began weaving these intentions into my everyday. I was calling upon spirits, the gods, the goddesses, my ancestors to keep holding me accountable, to remind me when I seem to be veering off path. And the truth is, I have a handful of AA and 12-step books. I even have Al Anon, and I just didn't see myself reflected in those books. I needed to see something that was really going to honor my magic, my shadow work, my psychic gifts. I needed something that wasn't going to ask me to abandon all of that just to fit in at a meeting. And so I wrote. I wrote the rituals, I wrote the journal prompts, I wrote about the shadow work. I wrote what I needed to hear and what I needed to read to make sure that I understood that recovery work isn't a punishment, that this hard act that it can be was a privilege to be able to and a blessing to be able to do it. And then I waited, right? I took a year to write this book. And then at first I thought I was going to have to edit it. And Spirit told me no. Hold on. And so I waited. And then I waited. And it was last year at my 5-year anniversary that Spirit spoke and said, "It's time. Are you ready?" Yeah, that's when this book finally moved from this manuscript of, I used voice to text in order to write it, right? Most of it. So it was a mess, right? But after that 5 years, I went through line by line, clarifying the words and the language that I was using. And it turned into something solid. It turned into a piece of magical recovery work that I was actually able to copyright. The reality is now, though, I've discovered that this book is not just mine, right? It belongs to the entire community. It belongs to any individual that is stepping into the path of recovery, that is already in the path of recovery, that practices witchcraft, that desires to practice witchcraft. I've had folks send me photos of their book sitting on their altar. I've had individuals share with me that they've pulled the book open when things have felt hard or felt heavy. And I've even had somebody say that this is the first time I actually feel like I can be myself. Like a reflection of me is honored in these pages. For a lot of folks, it's not about finishing the book from cover to cover. It's about knowing that they have a tool that is there that they can grab, that they can touch, that reflects their belief in witchcraft, their practice of witchcraft, and their path of recovery. Every time I hear that this is needed and that this is long overdue, I feel this just unbelievable amount of gratitude. I do. Now, selling 100 copies might not seem like a lot in the world of bestsellers and folks that are out there doing these incredible book tours and signing 25 books, 50 books in a matter of 2 hours, right? I even had another independent author tell me that most independent authors don't sell more than 200 copies of their book, right? So I'm already halfway there. And we're literally only 6 months. This is a very symbolic time for me. It means that more and more witches that are in recovery are being able to find each other. It means that sobriety and magic are not at odds with each other, but are allies with each other. It means that what began as my own private survival tool has become part of a collective movement. And this milestone belongs to any individual who has ever tried to heal while staying true to their own spiritual path. It's for those that have felt like they've been split in half by mainstream recovery spaces that didn't understand their belief in witchcraft. And it's for all of those that are ever joined Circle and have become moved through the work that we get to do together. I want to be clear, The Sober Witch Life is not just a book, it is part of something larger. It's the mobile app, it's the podcast, it's the radio show, it's the rituals that we get to do here in community to not just focus on our own healing, but healing the entire world of addiction. It's those recovery circles. Together, these offerings create this entire ecosystem of movement where witches can recover without abandoning their magic. It's also why I'm building the Sovereign Phoenix, a nonprofit that will provide religious protection for witches in recovery. Because the truth is, if our spirituality, our belief, or our practices are ever threatened, that means that our recovery can also be threatened too. We need this infrastructure, we need this recognition, and we need to be able to say that this is sacred work and know that the law is going to honor that. This work isn't just about me anymore, it's about us, each and every one of us. I feel incredibly proud that this milestone happened here in the Metro Detroit area, right? I've been born and raised in this city, you know. I love it. I absolutely adore it. I love to call it home. And I've come to realize over the past couple of years that the Detroit's pagan community has been fierce and it is full of creatives and it's resilient. And it's a gathering places for witches and heathens and seekers who understand what it means to build something from the ashes, to claim space where others are going to try to silence you, to craft rituals in basements and bookstores and backyards when nobody else would give you a temple. To sell my 100th copy there within this pagan community at this festival, surrounded by all of these incredible beings, felt like a blessing, as though my ancestors were telling me and confirming to keep going. The question that I've had for myself today is I've even, yesterday as I had a little bit more time to relax is where do we go from here? So I've set a new goal that I will have 500 copies sold by the end of 2026. I will also create a second print run, a second edition of the book, adding some of the things that I've come to find and explore over the course of this past year, doing more and more work with folks in recovery. I'll have a companion workbook that's also created for those that want to go deeper, that actually want something that they can work with on a regular basis, that includes more tarot spreads and places to put notes. There will continue to be more rituals, the partnerships with recovery communities in the area, more gatherings, and more chances for these witches in recovery to know that they're not alone. More than a number, though, or any of these other things that I can bring out and give birth to in the world, I want for this. I want for the phrase sober witch to no longer feel like a contradiction. I want it to feel normal, natural, and powerful. I want people to embrace this and be proud of proclaiming it. I want every single witch in recovery to know that they have a place where they belong. Because this is just the beginning. We're not only reading this book here together, we're building a movement, my dear friends. Much love from me to all of you.